In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Today we're continuing our series on becoming a healing presence. This is based on a really great book by a really great man. And I encourage you to go out and read the book. It's called Becoming a Healing Presence by Dr. Albert Rossi. This book encapsulates a lot, and we're not covering everything that goes into the book. So if you want to be fed more by the same topic, I was just going out and reading the book. If people are interested, maybe we can get it at the back. This lecture is called The Inner Workings. Before we start, I want to do a quick review of what we talked about last week. To sum up what we talked about last week, we talked about pain, right? If we're going to talk about becoming the healing presence, first we have to understand pain, what it is, where it comes from, why there is pain. We talked about the origin of pain. We talked that pain was never part of our plan. It was never part of God's plan when He created us, right? We were created with the light, with the union, with the communion with God, right? And our relationship with Him was our purpose. Our relationship with Him was our purpose for being created. Our communion with this light, by default, gave us a world that was empty of hurt, death, disease, sadness, fill in the blanks, right? What happens in the beginning? We get the garden, we get the fall, and what happens at the fall? I'm going to give a great example last week. If you eat of the fruit of the tree, I will surely kill you? No. If you eat of the fruit of the tree, you will surely die. Meaning what? That death and suffering and pain and anything that we need healing from came as a result of what? Came as a result of the mess up of the harmony that was going on in the beginning. Right? This harmony that God created us in, to be in union with Him, to be like Him, made in His image and His likeness. Once sin entered by our will, we took with it all of the things that come with sin. Once we had union with darkness and left light, right? If God is light, then the lack of God is not light, darkness. Once we started having union and harmony with darkness, we got everything that came with harmony with darkness. If harmony with light means love and painlessness and true identity and whatever else you want to say, then harmony with lack of light or darkness brings chaos, brings hatred, brings pain, brings tears, brings everything. Good? And so Christ comes. Am I super loud? No? Okay. Christ comes, and what is His response to this fall? His response is not to ignore the suffering, but to take on the suffering Himself. And the joyous part is not that God isn't the originator of pain, right? So sometimes we start to think, why does God let bad things happen? Or why is there evil in the world? And last week we sort of teased out why that isn't the situation, right? But the happy part isn't that God isn't the originator of pain. The happy part is that not only is God not the originator of pain, but to become back in union with us, He used pain and suffering, right? He likened Himself to the form of a servant, that's what we say, us, and He experienced everything that we experience. Why? So that through His suffering, we can experience resurrection, right? That was the Pauline today of liturgy, if you were here, that once He has suffered and died, and we die with Him, once and for all in our baptism, daily in our daily repentance, through that death, we take on healing, we take on resurrection, we take on life, and we begin to restore that harmony that we had in the beginning, right? So understanding the origin of pain helps us in understanding how to become a healing presence eventually in this series. Make sense? Good? Great. We also talked about society's issues. Society's issues with what? With dealing with pain. Una mentioned, and I thought you put it really well, Una, that we are an overexposed society and an underprepared society in dealing with pain. something like that. Which is basically to say, because of the world that we live in with social media at our fingertips and everything being the way that it is, we experience like sorrow all the time. Meaning what? You scroll down your newsfeed and you hear of this bombing and this death and this person got killed and this person was taken too early and this person has cancer and this person, right? So we're flooded with all of this unhealingness, if you will. And on top of that, we don't really talk about what it is to be healing presence. So we're overstimulated with stuff that needs to be healed, and we're understimulated with ways of being healing to the world. Okay? And we see that Christ, when he came to be the healer of all, right? Not just in salvation, meaning salvation of the cross, but that the salvation of the cross, through who he was as he lived, through our taking of his example, through now us, the church, being his body on earth, his humanity, we now continue the healing work of Christ on earth. And something very important that I would have said last week was that Christ never served based on the level of sadness of the person. What does that mean? Because we live in a society where we are flooded with sadness, we tend to rank pain, right? Like this person lost a job, yeah, that's bad, but it's not so bad because this other person on my newsfeed today found out their mom is sick, which is like pretty bad. But this person, right, we tend to rank things and we exert our healing based on this new like level of sadness that we've created, basically, right? And the beautiful thing is that when Christ came to heal, he never chose who to heal based on who is hurting the most. Every interaction that he had was healing. He was healing at all times, right? He was healing, you can even say like within himself, meaning he was always okay with him and the Father, right? Which then means that his outward ministry was always healing to everyone he came in contact with. Okay? And so, what is our response? The response is, now all things are of God, who has reconciled us to himself through Jesus Christ, and has given to us now the ministry of reconciliation. I would love to say that this is the talk that you're going to listen to, that you're going to learn how to heal everyone. You're going to leave a room, and you're going to leave this combat into a mission of healing everybody you see, where you get a healing, and you get a healing, and you get a healing, and you're going to think that everybody that comes into your presence, you are just going to pour all this healing down on them. This is not the talk for that. This is not the talk for that. We'll get to that later, of how to be healing. But before we talk about how to be healing externally, this talk is about the workings of the inner heart. This talk is about getting the inner connections in place in order to be ready to heal, in order to be overthrowing healings up. When you first get on a plane, any plane, you're given the presentation, the safety presentation, the protocols, and to your left and to your right, and up and down. And they always say something that sounds good like in the book, but if it's in real life, I wonder if I would react the way that they're telling me to react. What is it? They say that if the oxygen masks fall down, right, and if you have like your child or your elderly whatever, or your spouse or whatever, what do they tell you to do? Put your own mask first, and then help the person next to you. This is like, I feel like in a moment of frantic and frenzy, this would be the last thing that you would think to do. When in reality, if you were to put their mask on before yours, who are you hurting? Everybody. Why? Because you probably won't get to their mask if you're not breathing yourself. You're not helping yourself because you're not breathing, right? So this talk, hopefully, will address our need to put on our own masks first. Okay? To put on our own masks before we go and we try to put masks on everybody else, right? Why? Because in reality, we need to breathe just as much as the person in front of us needs to breathe. What do I mean? We, whether we want to admit it or not, need healing just as much as the person in front of us needs healing. Good? So, becoming a healing presence, right, this journey that we're going to be on, of becoming a healing presence, needs to start with becoming a healing presence to myself, right? And from there, we can continue and see how to spread that outwards, right? An unlit candle can't light an unlit candle. We need to be lit in order to light other candles, right? Good. And we see this throughout the teaching of the church. We see that in Romans. Now may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you believe in him, so that you may overflow with the hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. What hope are you going to give someone if you are not overflowing with it? I love that the word overflow is here. Richard of St. Victor, who was an 11th century philosopher, monk guy somewhere in England, I think. He says, when the soul is plunged into the fire of divine love, like iron, it first loses its coldness and dullness, and then growing to white heat, it becomes like unto fire itself. Meaning what? That our own working, our inner working within ourselves, transforms us to be fire like Christ. Right? If Christ is the healer, not me, if Christ is the healer, then only if I can take his healingness and give it to someone else will it work. Right? A candle can't say, I'm going to light this other candle, but I don't need fire. I'll figure out some other way to do it. It doesn't work. Right? The only thing about a candle that lights another candle is fire. It's not the wax, it's not the string. Right? Another one, by Saint Seraphim of Sarov, who was a monk in the 19th century in Russia. Acquire a spirit of peace, and thousands around you will be saved. This is such a strong statement. Acquire an inner peace, and thousands around you will be saved. Imagine the missionary mindset here, right? We think of missionary as going and going and going and going, whereas being a missionary is our everyday calling, right? But with this comes work. Why? What is the series called? Becoming a healing presence. Meaning what? That this series is going to end on February 4th. The material of this series can't end on February 4th. If any of this is to mean anything, the material of the series can't end on February 4th. Mean why? Because if truly we are to become a healing presence, this is a mindset that we have to have for the rest of our lives. Why? Because healing your inside is something that happens all the time. There needs to happen all the time, right? This isn't like, okay, I'm going to spend Lent this year trying to heal myself from the inside, and then Holy 50, I'm going to Oprah healings, right? Throw out healings. I'm going to be a healing fountain. No. Why? Because healing is something that we need rejuvenation all the time, right? So this is like an endless loop. I get healed from Christ, I become a healing presence to others. I get hurt, I get healing from Christ, I become a healing presence to others. Make sense? So this takes commitment, this takes work, and this takes like longevity. Don't picture this as like a 3-week, 3-month, 3-year thing. This is what it is for us to be Christians, right? To carry on the ministry of Christ here on earth. That's what the church is, right? The church is the continuation of the humanity of Christ on earth, right? Sorry, it's a lot. Bad news. The bad news is that our society doesn't help us with this. What do I mean? The bad news is that we are a society that hates being quiet and figuring out the heart. What we're going to call in this talk stillness. Stillness. Our society is not a society that is built to value stillness. If you're the busiest person in this room, okay? If you're the busiest person on the planet, what does stillness look like to you? From the moment you wake up to the second that you put your head down on the pillow, you have your schedule figured out, you have every meeting laid out, you have every project laid out, right? You're constantly buzzing with what needs to get done because you are busy. And when you go to sleep, does your mind shut off? I don't know about you, but mine doesn't. When I'm busy, my mind, even when I'm sleeping, is still just running, right? Or you could be a person who has a ton of time on their hands. You could appear busy on the outside, right? You're always running from one thing and going to another thing, but in reality, you're really very free and available. You don't have that much on your plate. What does that person's stillness look like? Do they get any? We're in a society that tells us binge watch Netflix and YouTube and hours of stuff, right? All so that we can what? Not face ourselves. We're in a society for some reason that is completely terrified of just being quiet from outside noise and just dealing with the person inside. Oh, I didn't have the graphic up there. That's the bad news. In all of this, though, there's good news. The good news is, and it's not easy, which is good. The good news is that stillness is a choice. Stillness is a choice. Stillness is what we're going to talk about as the fountain that gives inner healing. Stillness is this place, this quiet place. I'm not talking physically. This quiet place of the mind, of the heart, where we allow ourselves to enter into ourselves. This is a little philosophical, but enter into ourselves and just meet ourselves and not constantly be drowned by noise, whether audible noise or not, right? And this is not something that's built into our regular life. I bet that if we're ever given, I feel like even during liturgy, when we're given the moment of silence, we're all like, okay, it's been 50 seconds. Can I make it to 55 seconds? We're not built to deal with ourselves without anything like getting in the way, right? And so the first thing in becoming a healing presence to others is to become a healing presence to yourself. And the first way to do that is to meet yourself, to see who you really are, to quiet everything around you, and to see what really is going on inside of the heart. Why are you the way that you are? Why do you struggle with the things that you struggle with? Why did that word bother you today, that one thing that someone said? Why are you so anxious about this thing coming up? Why did this thing that happened when you were a child still bothering you now? Right? All of these things. We talk a lot about emotional health in our parish, right? This is essentially worrying about your health emotionally, right? This is essentially, if we make a commitment to having stillness in our life, I think this is the first step to us dealing with ourselves on that level, right? And if we are raised and grown with this idea of having stillness in our regular life, we'll become much better at understanding who we are, and much better at understanding what our relationship is to God and to each other. Okay? How do we attain this stillness? Interior stillness begins with exterior stillness. What does that mean? That in order to first become silent in here, right? When we're talking silent, I'm not talking about being quiet, right? Because we can be in a room and not doing anything, and our minds are still buzzing. We even said that when we're sleeping and we're busy, our mind is still going, right? Interior stillness, in order to be reached, first and foremost has to be an exterior stillness. Meaning what? shut everything out. Noise, literally audible noise, phones, anything. Anything that will take away your distraction. Okay? And I feel like you guys have heard this message a billion times. That you just need to put away your phone. And you just need to be quiet. Right? And so you do this, you go into your room and you turn off your phone, whatever. And you sit there without any distraction. And nothing happens. Why? Because just as interior silence begins with exterior silence, interior silence goes beyond exterior silence, right? So exterior silence, turning off your phone, turning off your mind, is just the threshold that we have to pass in order to get into the stadium of quieting down, right? In order to get past this loudness that we have in our minds. Yep. Let's see. Metropolitan Anthony Bloom says in his book, Learning Prayer, it's a great book, silence or stillness is a state of soul. It's a way. Silence or stillness is this own category of spiritual practice that we know very little about. Which is funny, because we come from a very monastic church. Right? We come from the church that originated monasticism for the rest of the world. But on the ground level, us, we don't know much about silence in our ordinary lives. Right? It's not something that is an assumed practice of our day. Keep reading. Silence, or stillness, is a way, a state of the soul, in which all of the powers of the soul and the faculties of the body are completely at peace, quiet and recollected, perfectly alert, yet free from any turmoil or agitation. I want to make clear that the stillness that we're talking about is not meditation to be Zen or whatever other yoga term you want to use. It's not becoming unaware of everything and just shutting off your mind, right? There's a difference, right? There are days where we've just had busy days where we're going to turn off our minds, right? And we do that by whatever numbing thing that we like. TV, food, friends, silence, whatever. But this sort of silence, that we're going to call stillness, is the practice of becoming aware. Is the practice of what? Becoming aware of what? Of everything. Of myself, of how the world works and how I fit into it, right? And this stuff takes time. These are really big questions, right? We're talking about a really serious habit here. This isn't I'm going to go home tonight on Sunday, sit in a room for 30 minutes of quiet, and if nothing happens, this doesn't have any value, right? Living a life of silence, becoming a healing presence, is a journey, right? And this idea of silence needs to be incorporated into our everyday, into our every hour, and you can even say into our very minute, right? Being a person who's truly still on the inside. And when we get good at being still on our own, this will eventually seep into us being still when we're around people. Meaning what? We're at peace. We know exactly who we are. We know exactly what bothers us and what triggers us, right? This is the fruit of being still. And again, this is something that takes time to acquire and nourish and grow. So don't be discouraged if it doesn't work in a week. Yeah? Again, this is a lifetime mentality. So stillness. Where do we begin? Where do we begin? The scripture tells us that be still and know that I am God. From this, we can also imply that the inverse is also true. Don't be still and don't know who God is. Is that fair? Don't be still and don't know who God is. Why is this a problem? Other than the obvious. And I think this comments on our society so much. This right here. So pay attention. Why is this a problem? Not only do we not know God, but God, if we lack stillness, we won't know Him. And what's the issue with not knowing Him? If we don't know God, we can't know ourselves. Why is this an issue? Because we are a society, I think, if I may comment on our generation or our world, that is dying to find its identity. That either is doing everything it can to find an identity in something, to have meaning, to be part of something, or to numb ourselves because we don't have meaning. Right? So I feel like our world either goes one of two ways. We attach ourselves to any cool new movement or way of life or trend or whatever that gives us identity, or we completely numb ourselves to the question and we don't want to deal with the idea that I don't know who I am. Why don't I know who I am in this model? Because I'm created in the image and likeness of God. So if being still leads to knowing who God is, and I'm not being still, and I don't know who God is, meaning what? There's no way for me to know myself. Right? So forget the religious aspect of it. Just think about yourself for a moment. All those nights where you just can't sleep, you don't know why, and you're dealing with this internal conflict, you can't even put your finger on it. We don't know ourselves. We don't know who we are supposed to be. Not to get sappy, but like you look in the mirror and you don't like the person who looks back. All that nice stuff. That has some truth to it. Right? Why? We don't know ourselves. Why? We don't know God. Why? We're not still. And this is not we as in like SBSS, or we as in the Copts, or we as in Americans, or this has been an issue from the beginning, right? We still know that I'm God is wasn't written last week. But it's to our advantage that we realize that our society takes this lack of stillness and catapults it into eternity, right? It's to our advantage that we leverage the knowledge of knowing God, right? It's to our advantage that we're aware that our society is basically egging on our human wanting of loudness and noise and not dealing with ourselves. Is that clear? Questions so far? Where to continue? Where do we go from here? This idea of stillness. Imagine for a second you have, I'm going to use it as an example. You have Abuna and Elijah, right? Christmas is coming up, and Elijah really wants to buy a present for mommy. Okay? In Elijah's mind, as with any little boy, he wants, I think, I don't have kids, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I assume that he's going to want to get her the thing that interests him. So he's going to want to get her an Xbox, because what better gift can I get for the mom that raises me and takes care of me? The best gift that I can get, right? And this kid, obviously, he has no money, right? As a little kid, he has no money. So he's going to the store thinking he's about to achieve like the greatest thing that's ever happened, but he has no guidance. He has no like framework for how to do this, right? So Abuna and Elijah walk into the store, and Abuna knows that Sarah needs new shoes, right? He needs new shoes. So he says, Elijah, how about these new shoes? I know Mommy would love them. And the kid, because he was missing the guidance, it clicks for him. He goes, oh yeah, Mom likes shoes. And so the dad guides Elijah, or Abuna dad guides, sorry. This was a story in my head, and now I'm putting names to it, so I'm trying to keep it straight. Abuna guides Elijah in getting to the end point that they both wanted, right? They both wanted to get a gift for Sarah. Elijah didn't really understand how to do it, he just sort of went in excited. But Abuna comes and he tells him, this is what Mom would like. He says, okay. And so they go up to the cash register, they bring the box of shoes, Elijah's holding it, puts it on the counter, the kid walks away. Who's going to pay? Dad, of course, right? The kid doesn't think about all this, right? It's sort of just how it happens. This idea that we're talking about is the idea of synergy. That in reality, we're that little kid that doesn't actually know what he's doing. Yeah? We're that little kid that like needs direction, that gets to just put their name on the box, like having not done any of the research or the work or made up any of the money, or right? But we can't do it without the guidance of God. Meaning what? That when we want to become healing presences, what is our actual purpose? Simply to be a channel through which God can flow His healing to others. Yeah? Because what we want to get people is an Xbox. They don't need an Xbox. Right? They need new shoes. What God wants to give is His healing presence to the world. We usually want to do it our own way. We usually want to ignore the sadness or the hurt inside of us, ignore being still, and healing others becomes another thing that we use to numb ourselves from knowing ourselves, right? Healing others becomes this pastime. That it's another thing to keep busy, to not deal with the person inside of ourselves. Does that make sense? Head nods. Maybe? Yes? Okay. What is the fruit of this synergy? A ton of things. A ton of things. And remember, how does the synergy start? Stillness. We're still on stillness, right? I'm just talking about the everyday workings of this now. What is the fruit of the synergy? That I get to know God, I get to know myself, and I get to heal others, and God gets to use me as His tool. I can be the conduit, or the pipe, or the thing that gives the healing that God has for the world. Okay? So our stillness, our inner stillness, leads us, if it's a habit and it's something that's done all the time, and it's an exercise that we employ, leads to the transformation of our hearts. Why? God takes over and begins, remember the quote in the beginning that we read, that when we're put in the fire, we become, when iron is put in the fire, it takes on the properties of the fire, right? So being in this furnace of stillness, you can call it, this furnace of stillness being something that will transform our inner selves, transform our hearts, to be what? To be Christ. To have our hearts replaced with God's heart. To have our wills replaced with God's will, right? We came in with the intention of Xbox, but God, through the stillness, us getting to know Him and getting to know ourselves, we understand that shoes is what's needed. Just as an analogy. Okay? Beautiful quote. The heart governs and reigns over the whole bodily organism. And when grace possesses the ranges of the heart, what does that mean? When grace possesses the ranges of the heart. When stillness, or God's presence, has taken over all of the pathways inside of here, it rules over all the members and thoughts. For there, in the heart, not in the heart, in the heart, is the mind and all of the thoughts of the soul and its expression. Meaning what? Our heart, not our physical heart. Our heart, our inner person, is everything. Right? If our heart is fixed, then our outward person is fixed. Let's keep reading. Within the heart are unfathomable depths. There are reception rooms and bedchambers in it, doors and porches, and many offices and passages. It's funny, this is written in the 4th century. St. Macarius the Great. And they're thinking about the heart so deeply. In it is the workshop of righteousness and of wickedness. In it is death, in it is life. The heart is Christ's palace. There, Christ the King comes to take his rest with the angels and the spirits of the saints. He dwells there, walking within and placing his kingdom there. This essentially elaborates on one verse. Which verse? The kingdom of God is within you. What does that verse mean? We heard in the Gospels. The kingdom of God is within you. What does that mean? That the heart of the person can either be a throne for Christ or a workshop for unrighteousness, is what he calls it. Right? But when the heart is made a throne for Christ, through this practice of stillness, what happens? The heart becomes the kingdom of heaven itself. Christ is able to dwell inside of this kingdom that we've prepared for him. And when Christ is the king, the actions of the kingdom, our whole self, are what Christ wants, are what Christ leads us to. That was a lot of theory, right? That was a lot of understanding of how stillness works. I want to give just one example of how to do this practically, right? How to employ stillness in our everyday. Stillness in the prayer of the heart. And this is something that comes out of our monastic tradition, okay? So, what is a monastic? A monastic is a person who chooses to leave living in society in order to concentrate all of their time on their relationship with God, right? And this was done early in the 4th century, and eventually these people were called monks, or monastics, meaning men and women. We call them nuns in English, but they're all monastics, okay? Monos being one in Greek, mono, monk, okay? So these people are the personal trainers that you want to go to understand what it is to have stillness and what it is to have an understanding of yourself and what it is to practice this idea of stillness. One of the most, if not the most, important practice that they tell us in their writings, which we can all read in our spare time, is the prayer that they call the prayer of the inner heart. Which means what? After having cleared your mind, after having gotten into this rhythm of silence exteriorly, we now begin with the interior. And what is always suggested is that you pick a prayer, a small prayer, and you repeat it. It's almost like you're wiping, right? You're wiping a stain. And every pass that you make of this repetition cleanses one more time, right? The most famous version of this prayer is the Jesus prayer, if you've heard it. Lord Jesus, and there's many iterations of this. Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me, a sinner. Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. Lord, have mercy, in one of the simplest ways that we say in the liturgy. This tool, which I think, I know that it's been spoken on before-ish, this could use a whole series by itself. The use of this prayer and understanding how this prayer can be incorporated into our everyday life, right? For now, I will suggest that if you're having trouble with stillness, use this as a tool to keep repeating. One of the fathers say that in order to get to the inner heart, use the physical heart as a gateway to get to the inner heart. The inner heart being like our inner self, right? Meaning what? That with the beating of your heart, pray this prayer, right? With the beating of your heart, pray this prayer. This calling on the name of Christ by name, which is referred to as an arrow prayer among the monastics, is something that goes straight to God, is how they see it. Something that goes straight to Him, and it comes back, and it allows us to practice the stillness. So, we'll end here. If you're struggling with stillness, try it, and try it for a long time. Okay? And if you walk away with nothing, try it. You don't always see the results of the vitamins that you take, but they're still vitamins. It doesn't make them any less valuable, right? You take them, and you will see their nourishment in you over time. Okay? Why is this all important? Because it goes back to our call, our vocation, our purpose, which is what? Now all things are of God, who has reconciled us to himself through Jesus Christ, and has given to us now the ministry of reconciliation. We want to be a good presence in the world. We want to heal all those who are hurting. We need to start with our inner selves and start healing ourselves daily, hourly, minute by minute, through meeting God in the inner heart. Questions? Thoughts? Ideas? Something you didn't say, right? Good.
So it is an intentional decision to start.
Oh, yeah.
And then probably like setting time for it. I want to make steps.
Yeah, no, that's great. What Tanta's saying is, so being silent has to be an intentional thing. Setting time for it and having like a rhythm. Of course, and this goes into our whole idea as a community that we always repeat of having a rhythm of life, right? Having this time built in where you know you are going to sit and be silent, right? And the idea of this stillness is that it starts as a chore and a necessity and an obligation, and when, I don't want to say when we get good at it, but when it's become something that's regular for us, again, we can be still at every moment, right? And this is sort of our purpose, to be still and be a healing presence at every moment. Meaning what? That even when I'm in with people, I can be still inside. I can be silent. But this only starts with, yeah, definitely, regimented, regular, consistent, trying over and over.
Yeah, because you mentioned like to set half an hour, and if I don't gain anything, I should not say I'm not. Like I will set half an hour to sit down and try to practice being quiet, and then I come out. If nothing happened, I should repeat that. I mean, intentionally repeat it, and until God will have mercy on me to really learn how to quiet down.
Yeah.
So that's the way to start.
Definitely. Yeah.
I just wanted to confirm that I understand.
So I understand the knowing God and yourself. I think it was Anthony who said, know yourself to know God.
Yeah.
And I know that's probably like, oh, could be a whole other talk, but how does that direction work?
Knowing yourself, so what Marianne is saying is that there's another saying of the Desert Father, St. Anthony the Great, whose feast is coming up actually, that says, know yourself so that you may know God. So it flips it. And how does that fit into all of this? Knowing yourself that you may know God, knowing yourself is constantly understanding your own limitations, right? And I feel like we live in a society that tells us like you can do anything, you will never fail, everything's going to be peachy, right? But when we get down to it, we all are very aware of how much, like how mortal we are, right? How often do we think of our death? Not to be dark, but how often do we contemplate our own death? Knowing surely that we will die, right? Knowing ourselves, and that being one aspect of it, will definitely speak to who God is, right? If I am this, and I am not able to do anything, not to be down on ourselves, but this will definitely lead to, I think, standing in the presence of God in awe of who He is and what He does, and not just as He's God and He can do anything He wants, but that my lowliness He took on Himself, right? Understanding our own lowliness and knowing that God came and took on our lowliness, that's saying a lot, right? But not understanding our limitations, the incarnation doesn't mean that much. Just a thought. Sarah.
Just a thought here about, I mean, as Tantel was mentioning, like the need, for kind of like teaching the how-to, putting it into practice, and as you're talking about it too, I think it'd be really neat if it's translated into maybe like a summer workshop, or like something where it's like a lot of times we have like, we'll focus on like a spiritual day where it's like very talk oriented.
Yes.
Maybe it would be nice to focus on something where it's like very workshop, like how to
Yeah.
practically incorporate like a stillness spiritually.
Yes.
Like something where like we can do that like collectively and individually,
Yes.
but in a more like formalized way.
Yeah.
To sort of train ourselves as to how to do that.
I totally agree. And this is something that I've mentioned, like before I've come here, and actually, me and I'm going to just talk about this, that us in the Coptic Church, especially in the West, have one word for going out and doing something, and that's retreat, right? And retreat, when we go on retreats, we're not really retreating, right? We're with a ton of people, we're all talking about a topic in the same room, right? We're all doing this collaborative thing. Whereas in Arabic, I think there's actually a nice difference in the words. There's mu'tamar and khidma, right? And both of these words in English are translated to retreat, so we sort of lose the sense of both of them. The things that we're used to going on are, I would like to call them conferences, right? Because we're going away. Yeah, we might have a few moments of silence here and there, right? But in reality, we're taking a topic and we're tearing it apart, and we are trying to understand it together. We're going to contemplate on our own a little bit, but this aspect of silence isn't really, or stillness, isn't apparent at all in these conferences or retreats. Whereas the idea of a khayla in Arabic, or literally like going away and being silent and retreating, to actually use the term correctly, is something I think that we need to bring into our communities. Something that I think that practically can really help our society in doing this as a group, so that when you go home, you know how to do it. I agree. Yeah. Yeah.
I think you have a really good idea, and I think you should really,
Okay, well, we'll talk about it on Tuesday.
I think that like for our last our summer day retreat that we did. I think there is the idea to try to incorporate that more, to try to, but I think it's kind of a different mentality. I think it's a different mentality when like you're doing it on a particular day to just enjoy that day, to set the mood for the day, versus doing this to train yourself for a lifetime. So
Yeah.
maybe it's kind of shifting that mentality to how can we utilize this day to train us for our normal rhythms of life.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the idea of like stillness making you aware, something I'd never heard before. Because I thought that the point was to like relax, like zen you out pretty much. And I think that that's why it was hard for me. So I like this, I don't know if you can like pull up the quote, but I just like the idea of silence making you alert and not making you empty.
Yeah.
I just think that that's like kind of the difference.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a difference between being quiet and being still. Right? Stillness leads to a very good sense of an awareness of everything, of who God is, of who I am, of how the world works, right? And just another plug for this book, it's Living Prayer by Metropolitan Anthony Blue, if you're interested. Any questions? Mark?
Can you talk a little bit about maybe the other direction? Because we said, if you want internal stillness, you need to first have external stillness. But what if it's, what about you developing the stillness within yourself that imposes itself in situations where there's lots of noise, that, your stillness is able to affect the situation because you have that inside of you?
That's why, actually, I started the lecture with plugging this book. Because basically what this book does is that it's not the most super practical understanding, like, you guys will see what we do next week with this series, is that we'll break it down, I don't even know how to call it, I don't know. It's just more, like, next week will be very tool-oriented. You'll understand how to do this. What this book is actually focused on is working the inside in order to affect the outside. So it's not a lot of stuff that we can do like in a PowerPoint and a presentation. It's more, this book is more of like a contemplation that you read and you sort of contemplate on what he's saying. Because this whole book is exactly that. It's the idea of chapter 1 is stillness, or I think, or chapter 2. And basically what he does is he takes this idea and he builds on it in order to allow you to be still, healing, still, and healing all the time in our everyday life. He talks about seeing the good in people. He talks about simply smiling more. And I knew this man personally, so he was a beacon of this. He's this old, like, very precious old little man. And he's always constantly smiling, and he's always caring for everybody around him. But he doesn't seem to be burdened by doing it, right? And this is sort of his, like, memoirs on that. So I'm still working through the book. I don't want to give you the answer because I haven't finished myself. But I would suggest, it's a very easy read. I read almost 80% of it in one day, in like 2 hours. It's very quick. But, yeah, the whole thesis of this book is how to turn interior into exterior. Yeah. Sorry, that doesn't directly answer your question, but any other thoughts? Don't you want to say something?
Yeah, I was thinking it will really make it so pleasant and doable if we really believe that we are the center of God's attention and love, and that we are really loved by Him. So if I know I'm going to meet someone who loves me, I will be excited about it, and I will feel ready and wanting to do it.
Yeah, and that's where I see this fitting, because like you truly get a sense of the truth of the matter of everything. You truly, like in stillness, you get a sense of who God really is and what He wants from me, and who I am and what I need from God. Like you get this perfect picture, and that's only achieved through stillness. Yeah. Thanks. Anybody else? Cool. Where are you taking from?
Sorry, I'll add one thing that we can learn you got.
Amen.
But I would like to say, just even from, if you will, like a secular perspective, when research has been done on the fruits of stillness, it actually does reveal that individuals have a greater awareness of what's going on inside themselves. They also are found to be more creative people. So it's not, in that whole process, or this idea of stillness, I mean, yes, we're tapping into the Creator and understanding our image in light of who He is. But there are so many additional tangible things that we see coming out of this fruit of stillness, which is stunning and available. But there, in addition to those studies and what that shows, there is just a whole other world, of ourselves and greater depths to which we will understand ourselves from that.
And I see that in St. Macarius' like workshop of righteousness. Like we can produce so much of ourselves that we don't know we can produce from the stillness.